great. I'm still just super excited about hearing the secretary's words, and it's just great to have someone that's a tech nerd and geek like a lot of us in this room really understand what we do here at ARPA-E. Just trying to be disruptive, trying to create American energy for all. That's really at the core of it. And I'm just really happy here today just to have Jim Gable, Chevron, just join us today because he actually understands and gets the importance of starting with early stage research, and he has a great organization that he's been running, great background. And we have a lot in common. So we're gonna have a little conversation. Jim, if you don't mind, there's a few people in the room. I just want to chat with you a little bit. Don't mind
Just a
them, they're
few.
just here observing.
Secretary Wright's very hard to follow. This is
Yeah,
going to be
that's,
hard to keep up.
yes, he is. So I thought we got a lot in common. Jim and I, we graduated from engineering school the same year, except Jim, he got the memo about what it takes to become a president of an organization. I didn't really get that memo, but yet we're still here together today. It's great. I'm really happy to be on stage with you, Jim. Thank you for being here. Thank you for
It's
everything
great to
you've been
be here.
doing in the investment space. Many researchers here today, including myself, we don't get a chance to have a lot of time with people like yourself that are actively scouting technologies globally.
Sure.
So thank you. Thank you for being here. I thought I got a few questions here. It started off 90 pages. I broke it down to 3. We only get a few minutes here. But your background, your experience, your leadership, and innovation has been really impressive. And so we're here because of the major energy breakthroughs that often begin with ideas from individuals or small groups. In this room, there are ideas that actually could shape the future of energy technology. So let's discuss Chevron Technology Ventures, if we can, and its role in supporting innovation and bringing early stage external technology into Chevron. And for those that are unfamiliar with CTV, you'll hear me say CTV, that's Chevron Technology Ventures. Can you briefly introduce your business and what you all do?
Sure. No, glad to. And look, I'll start by saying thank you so much for inviting me to ARPA-E. This is really an incredible place, a real asset, as the secretary's talked about. Our national labs are a real asset. We've enjoyed working with ARPA-E for many years, and it's great to be here at the 15th Summit. I'll start with a little bit of background, and then we can capitalize on that as we go through on commercialization of technologies and how we get them into the field. But as Cory mentioned, I'm VP of Innovation within Chevron's Technical Center. I report to our president of that center, who reports to the CEO. And I'm also president of Chevron Technology Ventures. And so we'll talk most about that today. The Catalyst organization, the process technology, also reports up through me. But we'll talk mostly about CTV. And where I'll just quickly mention, because we will build on this, is I've been with the company 26 years now, hard to believe, 26 and a half. And one of my first jobs was with Chevron Technology Ventures 25 years ago, and then I went off and did other things. But what it allows me to see is how companies have adjusted and adapted to the wonderful world of external innovation and what practices they have adapted to make it easier to work with earlier stage companies. Because so often, of course, large companies tend to absorb and squash all the great entrepreneurs and innovators out there. But CTV itself is the primary on-ramp for early stage external technology to get into Chevron. We invest in all technologies across what a very large energy company might need. So not only is that lower carbon technologies, but it's also a lot of oil and gas technologies. How do we continue to produce the affordable, reliable, and ever cleaner energy that the world needs is one of my primary areas of focus. And I'll look forward to chatting again.
It's great. We like to say here at ARPA-E that we bring power to possibility. And for us, we're trying to find these outlier technologies that are there as we sort of scout around, like you scout around, and see what the possibility is. If they actually work, what will be the impact? How will it matter? Will it move the needle? Sure. There are always a lot of great ideas and cool ideas. I like to call it the idea fairy. I had some colleagues that we say, oh, there's a lot of idea fairies out there that sprinkle fairy dust. But if these ideas can actually go into a commercialization pathway, makes it special. And so I really do think that's what you bring at CVT is that you're able to take ideas that are not only just cool ideas, but they actually have a path into commercialization. That's a little different. And so with such a rich history, you probably have some guiding principles behind how you choose projects and choose to invest. And probably many of us in this room where we're kind of interested, how does he place his bets? And I like to follow this concept I call the 7 T's, and that stands for technology, of course, the innovation, timing, which is sort of market readiness, a team, which is the management, how we manage the people on the team. You can't really create great technology if you don't have great teams. How you recruit on those teams, the managers, the directors, the vice presidents behind teams really matters. The team, I call it the term sheet, which is really the funding vehicles, the tools, having great tools, and then troubleshooting, which is problem solving. And of course, the takeoff. Is there anyone there to take off your technology? And so you mentioned Chevron's been able to act as an usher, a guide, a steward for these early stage investors and move that in. So what's your management philosophies for these early stage technologies like those today?
I like the 7 T's. That's interesting. Cory, you may have to trademark that. But you really, as a corporate venture capitalist, you really have to know why you're in business. And you see a lot of different reasons out there. We're in business to transfer technology into Chevron, right? I would much rather just access technology, scout it, help de-risk it internally without investing. We're not investing just to make financial returns. We're investing to help drive application development and ultimately de-risk as most appropriate for Chevron so we can be a great user of the technology. I don't know, there's a couple dirty secrets about venture capital, and one of them is that there's so many technologies out there that are getting funded in a world where money's cheap that aren't capable of scaling, that aren't able to get to where we need to go. And so we continuously, as a corporate VC, really try to earn our place in investment syndicates to make sure we're doing a great job giving early customer feedback, being an ultimate customer as a trialer, as a deployer of these technologies as best we can, and knowing our role gets us invited back into syndicates in the future as folks that are honestly probably better served than us to walk the halls of our national labs, of our universities, of our venture capitalists, so they can scout and identify perhaps the emerging technologies a little bit better than us. But we certainly want to earn our place as being a great industrial partner, as we can talk about.
That's great. So the partnership, thanks for bringing it up. The partnership can start really early. It really can be a situation where you're able to help early stage researchers realize the potential and the capabilities that they offer in the marketplace early on. And that's so important for people to have that vision. Could you elaborate on CTV's initiatives in facilitating deployment opportunities within Chevron, the ecosystem there? As many of the entities that are working on technologies with the aim of scaling up the inventions are here today, can you provide an overview of your group's sort of structure and noting that implementation on the team is larger than just your scouting team? So you have folks that go out and they scout technology, but implementation, I can find really good ideas out there, and people, I think you've just mentioned it, that there are always funding opportunities, new technologies, but they might not be commercializable, if you will. They might not be scalable. How are you able to get the implementation part correct?
Sure. And look, there's always room to improve, but I'll give you a few thoughts of how we do it, is that we really are focused on transferring technology in a very intentional way. It doesn't happen just by accident. So I go back to my days when we refer at an earlier comment to 25 years ago in Chevron Technology Ventures, there was a half dozen of us scouting. We would come across interesting technologies. We would assume, oh boy, the technology sells itself. Let's introduce these innovations into our business units, and they'll just be so wowed and amazed at the technology that they'll leap on it and wanted to pilot it immediately. And of course, that's not how it works. So now we have about a dozen scouting across all technology domains externally, but we have about 24 within CTV working internally with the business units across 3 different teams. And with that, we have invested in over 150 companies over 25 years,
Wow.
26 years. And of course, we transfer a lot that we didn't invest in. But generally speaking, we've piloted about 2/3 of solutions from those companies we invest in. So better said, it's of the companies we've invested in, we've piloted about 2/3 of those technologies. And then about 40% of those go on to be suppliers to some degree, large or small, to Chevron. And that's what we can really provide, is that early customer feedback. We also have...
Great numbers, by the way.
Well, it's a
two-thirds,
proven
that's
track
huge.
record, right? Because
Yeah.
the other thing is that corporate VCs in energy come and go. It's a cyclical space. We know where the 100-year trend is. All forms of energy have to be affordable, reliable, and ever cleaner. But within that, there's a large oscillation. And so you just have to have staying power, strategic staying power in terms of what we do. And another program we use to help deploy technology is Chevron Studio, where we're partnered with National Renewable Energy Lab to create a platform by which we link entrepreneurs that are looking for their next gig with 43 universities and national labs right now that might have IP sitting on the shelf. And how do we connect those two as kind of the broker, as the platform, and help them start writing a business plan, start their journey to help innovate? And we've really enjoyed that partnership with NREL. We're now on the 6th cohort after 3 years, and that's doing well. We have 10 companies that are currently up and running.
Yeah, so it's much bigger than the investment. Like you started this conversation, it's a lot bigger than just providing the funding. You're actually acting as an entire steward, a mentor, your coach for it's the ecosystem that you've established that's really exciting. And I think for many of the entrepreneurs in the room, it's something that you should look forward, to if your technology matures to a level where you can get a partner like Jim, and you're involved in an ecosystem that allows you to steward your technology to a greater success, because you just heard some numbers there, over 60% involved in getting to the point where they could be implemented. That's huge. And in this case, in your business, energy is such a big deal for the world. I like to say that delivering affordable energy improves the lives around the entire world. And I think the Secretary stated that as well. So the technologies that we're trying to invest in early here will continue to improve those lives. And CTV is really acting as this internal technology steward in a way of just forging new opportunities that really cross-cut the entire Chevron BU.
Sure.
I remember just my early stage as a researcher, we would come up with great ideas and the business units would go, wait a minute. We're not ready for that. No, not in my refinery. I know that you have a great idea. This great new catalyst you came up with, Cory. Now, come talk to us about 20 years from now. We'll think about it.
Hey, Cory, can I jump in on that real quick?
Yep.
Because it ends up being industrial sales. There are things that we do within CTV that we try to learn from the sales industry. I don't know if that's an industry, the sales function in some of our large vendors that sell into Chevron. So we try to break down what are the behaviors that we need to embark upon as, I hope my team doesn't hear this, as industrial salespeople who are selling into the business units. Yes. Because look, in my career, I've run a refinery, and you know how everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And at the 6 a.m. start a shift meeting, everybody's plan changes on the daily fires of the day. We have fantastic people in our business units, but you need to approach and position the innovation to help solve their problems. How does it fit into what they're working on? So understanding clearly our business units and what their specific technology needs are is really fundamental to what we do. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that was a great interruption, because thank you for bringing that point. It's the little nuances, I think, that really shape the ideas and innovations. You can have a general idea that you understand, you think you know what the problem is. And I spent 10 years at a refinery, and I know, but it's not until you get behind the fence, and you're working in this, this class 3 Div 2 environment, and you realize that, okay, the problem isn't like I thought it was. It's something a little more nuanced. There are a lot of details that I need to reshape this invention to be, and it's great to see that you've been able to kind of sell internally. And that's essentially what it is. You have to pitch internally.
You bet. Look, everybody has wins and losses. I hate when people get on stage and talk about how everything great is doing. We can continue to get better, in particular in, hey, we got a first pilot out there, we got a first deployment at a business unit. How do we pollinate that more readily, more easily, with less friction to other business units that have similar assets? It's always, hey, my asset's different, I need my own pilot. Sure, it worked over here, but everything's different over here. So we have plenty of room to improve, but that's the fun part.
Great. So this tech to market strategy of like utilizing existing assets, something I'm very familiar with, can really accelerate commercialization from the inception of a great idea all the way through. Collaboration in the innovation ecosystem is also crucial. So what are some of the elements of a successful path to commercialization that you've observed in emerging technologies?
I think you really have to start, maybe the value-added comment here is, besides all the folks that know the basics of innovation here in this room, is I go back to how do you fund technologies and innovations in the energy space that take advantage of existing infrastructure? So let's think about amount of capital. Do you need more capital? Well, the energy transition sector took in $2 trillion last year. That's double what it was in 2020. I read that data point last week. And so capital, I would argue, isn't the problem.
Yeah.
It's really a question of risk and risk reduction. Back when I was starting out 25 years ago, you had a couple rules of thumb of venture. One of them was around, hey, we really need to invest in things that are 10 times better than the incumbent solution. Otherwise, you won't be able to overcome the inertia of the user to get that done. Now, obviously, 10 times, that's a euphemism. That's, boy, if I ever see one of those, that'd be great. But the point is, how do you overcome the inertia? And what we've seen later is that here we are in the energy transition space. A lot of what we're working on doesn't get you to competitiveness from a cost perspective. It might really be lower carbon and have a lower carbon intensity, but you need affordability, reliability, and lower carbon. And so how do you make sure that you can reduce the risk of some of these technologies as a partner to overcome that gap? There was, back when I was coming up, hey, you had the McKinsey 2x2 matrix. You had market risk, you had technology risk. And everything we do is in that upper right corner in energy tech. Not everything we do, oil and gas is not. But the point being that how do you reduce it to just one or the other where you're taking that risk? Getting into an existing infrastructure is really one way to do that. And we've seen that in California, where renewable diesel has done well. And it's more than 50% of the market. And that's because it's a drop-in fuel, right? It's getting out there and it's displacing something that already exists. Now, of course, policy helps and drives the economics, but that's a very important path that we need to think about going forward, is how do you work on things that are leveraging existing infrastructure? We know in this room how hard it is to build new infrastructure. Yeah. I also read a stat the other day that said from 2010 to 2014, we built 1,500 miles on average per year of 345 kV lines or above. 1,500 on average a year. Wow. And yet 2020 to 2024, we built 400 on average. And so that infrastructure problem isn't necessarily getting better. It's always tough to build infrastructure. So how do you leverage existing infrastructure in the best way you can, so you're not in that suicide square, so you're just taking maybe tech risk instead of market and tech risk?
Yeah, that's great. I think the infrastructure also, like you mentioned, facilitates the acceleration, just moving things out a little faster.
It's just faster.
Yeah. People feel a little more comfortable. They actually also know how to operate the existing asset. I think it helps too. So moving from the actual concept through piloting, and then actually when you get to the point where you can operate after the retrofit, people are familiar with it. They understand how it works, and operations is where things happen. So I can clearly see, as a partner, Chevron would be an incredible resource for any early stage entrepreneur or innovator like the ones in this room here right now listening. And customer feedback, you mentioned customer feedback. So at ARPA-E, we like to manage our programs quarterly, and we try to provide as much feedback as we can. along the way. I think this is our active management style. And that style, it's not a micromanaging approach. It's really just a collaborative approach to make sure that we're providing the right feedback to get things
Sure.
moving. And so I can tell that you are involved in a similar style. You may not call it, active management, but the feedback is important. And in general, what are your views on synergies and partnerships between like highly resourced, large energy companies like yourself and small, agile startups? Do you have any success stories you'd like to share where CTV maybe as an access some early stage technology that ultimately was deployed in Chevron's business? And you sort of led to this a little earlier, but you had any case studies or anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, of course. Look, we know how big the energy industry is. The Secretary talked about how complex the challenges are. They're really, to your point, too complex for any one company to solve. This is going to take a lot of partnerships. This is going to take leveraging the best of the innovators, the idea, the management team, the energy, the enthusiasm, the knowledge, the technical knowledge, with what incumbents and the energy companies can do, at least in Chevron's case, in terms of the capabilities, the assets, the customer relationships, the distribution, the brand, the capital base, maybe most importantly, the systems engineering, how all this stuff needs to work in the field. Bits take the elevator, I say, and molecules have to walk up the stairs. It's tough to put a molecular-centric technology. It's capital intense. You really have to know what you're doing so you hit it right the first time. But with that, we have a couple items I'll mention. One is around a company called Svante, which is carbon capture through adsorption, metal organic framework technology. We first intersected that space in 2012. We first invested in Svante in 2014 through the venture group. We continued to invest. We continued to provide them that early customer feedback about, hey, in the field, this is what your solution's going to have to look like. This is how it ties into other things in the field. And then the group we work closely with, Chevron New Energies, led their latest investment round in a sizable way. And of equal importance, CTV worked with the DOE to help pilot and build a 25-ton per day capture unit out in California in our oil field in San Joaquin Valley. So with that, you got to understand balance of plant, systems, interconnections, maintenance schedules, efficiency in a hot climate, humidity issues associated with carbon capture technology. So you learned a lot. For those that are working on new innovations, I would just continue to encourage, to Cory's point, to meet up with somebody who can provide you that really close customer feedback early in the process. Entrepreneurs are fantastic, their energy enthusiasm. It's not 100% batting average on picking the right beachhead market. And so I think about MIT's fabulous 24-step process in the Martin Trust Center to be an entrepreneur and to succeed. And they've boiled down entrepreneurialism into a great science. I don't know if folks from MIT are here, but I love that process.
Got a few out there.
It's linear. Well, I know Evelyn's here. It's linear for me, which simple minds like. But one of the steps there is, will the dogs eat the dog food? Yeah. How do you get early in the process somebody that can give you really the accurate feedback? So that's important for entrepreneurs. And then the other example I'll cite, Cory, real quick, is advanced clean energy storage, which is a project that Chevron New Energies, Chevron Corporation, is building in Utah. And this is 220 megawatts of wind powering electrolyzers to create 100 metric tons of green hydrogen a day. We're storing in salt caverns. Then when the electricity is needed, we wind that hydrogen back, run it through a generator, create electrons, which we sell into Los Angeles. And this was a project we invested in last year, 78% Chevron, 22% Mitsubishi. And we took over a project that was already underway, and also, by the way, it received a large loan from the DOE, which is a great aspect of reducing risk. But we took over the project and we realized what was left to be done. You have very capable, very smart folks that perhaps have less experience than us in scaling the technologies, and we were really able to add a lot on the large systems approach. It's very complex what you're dealing with. Yes. We were able to wrap everything and present it as a Chevron, let's call it risk, instead of risks to vendors or customers that you might be dealing with a party that is less experienced. And our existing, and the parties we took over from are great, but that was a way also going back to that risk reduction point. And now that's going to get up and running later this year. That's going to be one of the largest green hydrogen projects in the world. It's another great way that we're helping drive that energy future.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, and congratulations on that.
We're not there yet. We're getting
Yeah,
there.
you're getting there. So when you jumped in on that would you say it was probably a little higher TRL, like maybe TRL kind of 8 range? Was it?
It was a systems engineering problem.
Okay.
Wind is not a challenge.
Yep.
Electrolysis is not a challenge. Storage underground is not a challenge. Perhaps hydrogen in a salt cavern, hey, things to learn there, clearly. We're good at that. And then, of course, running it back and shipping the green power elsewhere is not a challenge. But it was a systems challenge. And so that's one of these areas of risk reduction we talked about earlier, where Chevron could step in and do that.
Yeah, you have so much experience around the world with these large projects, investing in large projects, doing an excellent job at project management. And so, engineering project management, moving projects forward, signing that AFE and going into construction, you're familiar with all of that and bringing that to the table when, inventors are at the right stage of the technology where they can engage you. It's a great resource to have. So really, thank you so much for sharing that story. And it's one of those things where researchers really don't know all the paths that are available to commercialize their innovations. There are different pathways. Going to the field, you learn so much in the field. You mentioned things like humidity and things you just sort of don't think about at early stages that will matter when you get to commercialization. What's one mistake that you see brilliant researchers make when trying to commercialize their work, and how can they avoid it, or at least mitigate it?
Look, they're brilliant researchers for a reason, and that's because they're brilliant. And so we go back to this beachhead market challenge. How do you know what you know, and how do you have enough humility so you know what you don't know? And how do you take feedback early from even a slow-moving corporation and all the stereotypes of energy companies, which honestly maybe have basis in fact long ago, but I think we're changing quickly. How do you make sure that you take that feedback in the spirit intended, take it from the perspective of, my gosh, these folks know what they're talking about. They've done this at scale in the industry, and really are able to pivot without being so anchored in your initial idea that you're hesitant to take feedback, right? You really have to run it through a large trial of experiments, right? Try something, it doesn't work, admit it doesn't work. Move on, go off and head in a different direction. The other issue, Cory, is that I think folks a lot of times just choose the wrong technology. They choose something that can't scale. Maybe it has something that will, maybe you need to really be clear about its ultimate cost competitiveness, and the level of perhaps subsidies that might be needed to clear the green premium. Maybe it's something about, hey, you're using one of these funny elements at the edges of the periodic table or the bottom of the periodic table instead of something that's more common. We have fantastic venture community in the United States. I do think in a world of cheap money, it has overcapitalized the front end of the innovation process. So I think we're creating a lot of ventures that perhaps should have been maybe best left either in labs to continue working or not funded entirely on that commercialization journey. And so with that, you really just have to be forthright about early feedback you're getting. You have to be humble about, hey, maybe this isn't going to work out. Let me go off to my other thing or another market that this technology can be used for. Those are probably the two things that I see most often where we can all improve.
That's great. That's great advice. Thank you so much. And these are our babies, right? These ideas and the innovations. And I think every idea that I came up with that I tried to turn into some IP, it's like my baby, And so when people give us feedback, we brace up sometimes, but then it's important to have more folks involved, and it takes quite a number of people to get things to commercialization. So everybody's got to buy in at some point. Okay, so we got a few seconds left. This has been fun, Jim. Thank you for coming today. So I'm going to challenge you with our lightning.
I'm sorry, we're out of time.
I'm sorry. I got you. You got to do this. So this is the hardest set of questions that I came up with. So this is the lightning round. So we're going to try this lightning round where I name a few emerging technologies that have piqued ARPA-E's interest. And you give me one word or a short phrase to describe the technical or scaling challenges and the technology's potential, the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay? Okay. All right, let's start. AI.
Transformational potential. It needs its opportunities to become more energy efficient. Its opportunity is to become easier on the application development side for industrial purposes. That was more than one word.
That was more than one word. And you did well. I like AI, so you did well with that one. Quantum computing.
Amazing potential. It still is a few years away, but it's amazing potential. It'll have many, many impacts as it arrives. Quantum sensing is already here. Now we need to get to quantum compute.
How about geological hydrogen?
What did Tom Cruise say? No, Cuba Gooding Jr. said in that movie, "Show me the money." Look, and take this from the perspective of an energy company, is that we have a lot of folks internally who are much more schooled than I am that are a little bit skeptical on that, which is we've drilled a fair bit of wells. We haven't found, to my knowledge anyway, large reserves yet, and I would just head in that direction.
And one more, fungible hydrocarbon fuels from CO2.
Very interesting. Need to be reasonable and rational on the ultimate cost potential of some of those. We really need more technical breakthroughs in the conversion efficiency to get down to current solutions.
Awesome. You want to leave some thoughts with our audience as we wrap up?
What a fabulous space to be in. Secretary Wright talks about the impact of energy on our society, and boy, is it extremely important. And we can talk from our perspective in Maryland here about what energy means to us, but just know there's 8 billion people around the world who have a variety of different perspectives, and this group is going to help address all the opportunities we have to make it affordable, reliable, and ever cleaner. Thank you, Cory. I appreciate it.
Jim, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.